I want to welcome everybody here to this Brown Bag Lunch program at the Museum of Danish America. And for our November program, it's wonderful to feature one of our current interns who is spending several months here as part of our museum team. Svend Buus is one of our scan design interns here from both Denmark and Argentina, and he will share more of his story and kind of the context around that in this presentation today. We want to give a special thanks to Dennis Andersen, the sponsor of our Brown Bag Lunch series, as we complete the live filming here today, then this presentation will be available on the museum's YouTube channel for people around the country and around the world to enjoy. So we have been looking forward to this presentation and learning the history of Danish migration to Argentina and the community there. And we have actually a couple of representatives of that community here with us today. But we will turn this over to Svend to tell the story for us. Svend.
Bring this a little bit closer. Well, thank you everybody. I'm really glad to be here at the Danish Museum. I'm really glad to have learned a lot about the museum and also to get to know you all Danish in America. How cool is that? My name is Svend Buus. I was born in Argentina by a Danish descendant, and then my parents decided to move back to Denmark. So actually, I'm 4 generations Dane from Argentina back to Denmark. So I'm half Argentinian and half Danish. I guess you feel the same. So what I like to present you here is how it is to be a Danish Argentinian today, me, but also see if you can feel related to that, I guess. But first, I brought some papers on the table. I will go get one. You have one here. Because this is a Danish tradition. We start by singing a Danish song, and we end also by singing a Danish song. You may know the first one is I Danmark er jeg født. I like you all to sing in Danish. I think I can, you can read what it's about in English on the next, but it's always better to sing in the local language to get to know the culture, and it's have a better rhythm than if you translate it to and sing in another language. The last one, I get to that later, but I Danmark er jeg født. I was born in Denmark. I believe this is a melody that was sung not just in Argentina but also here. It's a common melody to promote Danishness, to promote the Danish identity, especially because it was written by Hans Christian Andersen. He said, okay, how can we promote Danishness abroad? And he wrote it. I'm not remember now who brought the melody. It came much later. Then they make another melody, so there are actually 2 melodies. But I think I will sing the melody that we're going to sing first, and then we all sing along. Okay? It sounds like this. I Danmark er jeg født, der har jeg hjemme, der har jeg råd, derfra min verden går. Du danske sprog, du er min moders stemme, så selv velsignet du mit hjerte når. Du danske friske strand, hvor oldtids kæmpe grave, står mellem næblegrød og umlegave. Dig elsker jeg, Danmark mit fædreland. Okay? We sing it slowly. Yeah, and I have a couple of helpers, Marius, my Danish colleague, and Andres, which also have Danish, half Argentinian, half American. Now, okay. I Danmark er jeg født, der har jeg hjemme, derfra jeg jord, derfra min verden går. Du danske sprog, du er min moders stemme, så sødt velsignet du mit hjerte når. Du danske friske strand, hvor oldtids kæmpe grave, står mellem et blæk og humlehave. Thank you. And actually, it's a good way to learn Danish by singing. And actually, when I went to Denmark, I didn't know much of Danish. I thought I knew. And then I started to go to the church because they sing a lot. And that's how you also can learn the language. Well, what I want to show you, you see a little bit of the picture here. It's funny, they're all dressed in the folk vestments of Denmark. There still exists folk dancing in Argentina. But where are these Danish settlers settled in Argentina? And when you see the map here, this is the whole country of South America, of Argentina. Most of them came to the province of Buenos Aires. On the right, you see the capital, Buenos Aires, next to the coast. And south of that, that is the Pampas. And the Pampas is a flat, fertile land. You can compare it with the Praia here at the Midwest, a fertile land. So most of the Danish settlers, they were farmers. And what's best, instead of going to the jungle or to the desert land or to the mountains, go to the fertile land of the Pampa. So the majority have concentrated on these three towns called Tandil, Tres Arroyos, and Necochea. I'm not sure if this is Tandil, Tres Arroyos, and Necochea. And myself, I come from Necochea, and Andres, he comes from Tres Arroyos. Besides that, there are other smaller towns as well of Coronel Dorrego, where most of the Danish settlers went to and started working the land. And I believe it's the same like here, that the first settlers came and they were going west, buying land, conquering land in a way. In Argentina, they were going south. The more farther south. So you can imagine the rest of the country, and they're all the way down to the Tierra del Fuego, to the Patagonia, where there were also Danes settled there. How many days they were? Well, the next map I can show you, I can come back here, but there were about, it's the next one. About 15,000 Danish that went to Argentina between the 1860s and the 1920s, more or less. But before I switch over, I'd like to show you that there were also kind of Danish colonies in the rest of the country. For instance, up north, to the right, to the east, that's the jungle area. Can you believe Danish coming all the way from cold Denmark into the jungle of Brazil, Amazonas-like? And that was a very hard task. But there were also Danes coming to the mountains regions, the region of Mendoza. If you like wine, red wine, you probably have red wine from Argentina, from Mendoza. That's the winery area. So there were Danish settlers and promoting winery also in Argentina. So this is some of the picture, how they started to go from Denmark to Argentina by ship, then by steamship. Took a month, more or less, sailing all the way to South America. And there you see the peak is more or less in 1912, there were about 5,000 Danish that settled in Argentina. But then they continued throughout the 1920s, not as much as in 1912, but still, and the funny part is that in the US, by the 1920s, kind of stopped the immigration to the US. In Argentina, they continue all the way up to the Second World War, 1940, 1950s. But today they're still coming Danes, both in Argentina and the US, like Marius, me. But it's not the same like going all the way. Why? Well, Denmark, 1850s, 1870s, was not the best country to move on. The economy was not that well. There was not fertile land enough to feed the population, and if you were poor, you will continue being poor. So if you want a better life, why not come to the land of the dreams, Argentina? You thought it was America. Well, actually it was, because my great-grandfather went to the US first. He emigrated from Denmark 1892 and settled in South Dakota, in a small town called Danville, near to Viborg, which I am going to visit later on. But he didn't do well. he had a very hard task as a farmer, and back then there was not modern machinery. They had rough weather, very cold times. There was not good harvesting, so he left and then he moved to Chicago, where he ended up working in a machinery factory, agricultural factory named McCormick. You may be related to McCormick brands here. So he became an agent for McCormick in Scandinavia, went all around promoting these machineries, these tools. And at some point he went to a farm that he get to know, to work with these tools. And they said, okay, for one day I can show you how this machinery works. It started to rain, typical Denmark. So he had to stay there for a whole week. And that's how he got to know his maid, his girlfriend. And then suddenly he had to be sent to Argentina. And there he met a friend that said, why don't you come here? I mean, whatever you throw away, it grows. And that's a good idea. He went back to Denmark, how do you say, compromise. He got married and then moved to Argentina in 1904. So in a way, I kind of trace him back to his beginning, being here next to South Dakota, to the area where he first started. And then he wrote his memoir, which I translated into Spanish, 70 Years of Hard Work. That's the title of his memoir. So now we know how hard it was to move away as a migrant, to change the culture, the habits. In a way, the US is kind of similar to Denmark. It's very easy to switch from Danish to English. English, there are some Danish words like window, vindu, ship, skip. The word Vikings word, but that's another story, the Viking. Much difficult in Argentina to learn the Spanish. However, they actually got close to the local tradition. Well, this is the farm in Denmark that my great-grandfather lived, was born there, but the parents died. He was the oldest of the siblings. I don't want to take responsibility of my siblings. So he divided all their sisters and brothers to other farms, and he moved to the US. That's how he started. Then you see the picture when he got married with a very, very, very young lady. She was 17, he was 32, and it was quite common back then. They got 9 children, all alive in Argentina. And you see to the left, that's how they started in Argentina. It's called a chacra. It's a farm, but the pampa was totally isolated, no trees, no crops, nothing, just virgin soil. So they had to build a house with mud, and that's how they started, some wooden stick and mud. And then they had to cultivate this very hard soil, virgin soil, and that's what he did. He bought like 600 hectares, I think it's like 1,000 acres, a little bit more. It's a huge land, fertile virgin soil that he had to work by horse, by manpower, walking behind the horse with this plow, like similar to this one you see up here, while his wife was at home waiting for him for weeks. Because he was so far away, he had to get very up early in the morning until very late in the evening. So it took time to go forward and backward in such a long, big area. Can you imagine being a woman totally isolated, alone in the house? That's how they started. And the way they started all the Danes was that they started to go to another Dane that already was established. That was an owner of the land. So they say, okay, because there is so much land, you can take that part, 500 acres, let's say, and then you can work your land for free, but the benefits we split in half. That's how they started, the Danish settlers, when they started working as a farmer in Argentina. But how did everything started? With the Danish and Argentinian connection. And it started all the way back in 1841, where the king, Christian VIII, sent this ship called Bellona to make a relationship between the Republic of Argentina and the monarchy of Denmark. So if Argentina will accept it, the monarchy, Denmark will accept the Republic of Argentina. And they signed in 1841. And the funny part is that back then, Argentina was a dictatorship, quite a large experience of dictatorship in South America. That lasted for like, what, 20, 30 years? And, well, the dictator had a daughter called Manuelita. But there was a Dane, an artist, that he wrote a piece of theater, a play called Afar from Denmark, in Danish, Fjern fra Danmark. That is about when this ship, Bellona, went to Buenos Aires and the commander fell in love with the daughter of the dictatorship. In the play, her name is Rosita. Sounds much more like a Mexican novela. And actually, the commander was already married, but Rosita was so in love with him as well, so she tried to find how much in love he was to him to cast or throw a ring in the water. And of course the commander jumped into the water and rescued the ring. And they had a romantic moment in a way. So that's the play. In reality, they didn't fall in love. Manuelita, it was too windy suddenly, and she had to get back. But the girlfriends of Manuelita stayed on board, and they have a big feast. So that's a funny story that happened until today, and that's the first connection between Denmark and Argentina, quite close in a way. And another story from this ship is that there was a marine that deserted. He went to Buenos Aires in the night when nobody saw him, and he stayed in Buenos Aires. What is the Hansen? Oh, I don't know. Okay, we have to sail away, and Hansen stayed in Argentina. The grandson of this deserter, who was very harsh, I mean, if you were deserted, you would be killed in Denmark, especially during the monarchy. The grandson became the Ministry of Economy in Argentina in the 1920s. And further on, the great-great-great-grandson now is the ambassador, Argentinian ambassador in Copenhagen. Isn't that funny? I know, because he was so interested about the Bellona ship. Why? Yeah, I have a relative, an ancestor that was a deserter in Argentina. So that's a funny story, how it happened. But then, officially, the first Danish settler in Argentina was Hans Fuhl, as you see here, with his family. Actually, he came to Argentina in 1844. That's quite early. Just at the beginning of Rosas' dictatorship. That was his name, Juan Manuel de Rosas. And he was a very visionary person. His promise in Denmark was, no matter what you do, no matter what you learn, if you want to be a pastor, a school teacher, if you were born poor, you will always be poor, no matter how many titles you get, university degrees. I don't like living in Denmark then. So he moved with all his title. He was a pastor, he was a teacher, he was a carpenter. Juan Fuhl was quite visionary. And he settled in the Pampas area called Tandil. And he made an innovation. He started to plow the land for the first time ever south of Buenos Aires. I mean, there were people sowing crops, but not that much. But in this place called Tandil, it was a fort, like many forts here in the Midwest as well. He opened up for settlers to say, who is very good, who would like to be an agriculture and cultivate the land? Me, say Juan Fuhl. So he was received, not just like that, I'm making a play out of it, okay? He was received by this commander at the fort of Tandil and started to plow the land for the first time in the area that was so fertilized that during the Second World War, Argentina was the world granary and sent a lot of grain to Europe for free almost. So much crops still comes from this area where Juan Fuhl was the first to cultivate. But he has struggled because back then there was the cowboy in Argentina called the gaucho. And the gaucho was a cattle maker, how do you say? A gaucho. And he didn't like to cultivate the land. I mean, my land is your land, and they use it. And the gaucho did two things. They plant two trees. One to get shade, because there was no shade, and the other to have a hammock. So you can relate what was his lifestyle. Very chill out. So when Juan Ful started to work the land, the gaucho came and said, "This is my land. You're plowing the land for my horses, but you have a land on the other side. Doesn't matter. I mean, this is my land." So he had to struggle to battle with gaucho with guns almost. Nobody got hurt. And finally, the rules, the law started to apply the benefits for the agricultural in the area. By cultivating the land, he could have crops that he could grain. But how? He created a mill. On a small stream of water, he created a water mill. And that was something completely advanced at the time. And by that, he could make a bakery. He was the first to have a bakery, Danish bakery, like the Kringelmann here, in 1852 in Tandil. So he became a very wealthy man. And I'd like to add more of his story, because he was also a teacher, the first teacher in Argentina. Even though he liked to form a Danish colony, he used local custom. What you see here is a poncho. The one that Deb is not here, but he usually comes with a poncho. That's a vestment with a hole in the middle that you plug it through the head, and it covers you, and it's very warm and covered by the wind. And you can use it as a quilt when you sleep as well. And a chiripa, which is a kind of a trouser for the gaucho. So he became a Danish gaucho in Argentina, and actually also drinking mate. If you give me 1 second. Okay, we have the tea that you can come on, show it around, and we drink it with a straw. And this is kind of modern straw. The original one was made of calabash, or by wood, or metal. And of course, you drink it, and you give it to the rest, and they all use the same straw. Ooh, that's not very Danish like, but that's typical Argentina. If you can show this around, you can smell it, just raw tea, and then we can have a taste later on. So Juan Ful became a very Argentinalized. He even changed the name from Hans to Juan, so he's known today as Juan. One of the things that triggered me is that he decided to come back to Denmark. He didn't live the rest of his life in Argentina. Why? Well, he had a wife, and a wife in the Midwest or the Pampas was very hard life. There was no future for the kids, no schools. I mean, not even the governor started to have applying rural schools, not up to the 1940s, quite late. And that gave a trigger for the Danish community to organize themselves and create different institutions. Before I continue to the Danish institution in Argentina, I'd like to add another story. This is about a ship called El Condor that had to sail Champagne to San Francisco, going through South America, Cape Horn, very dangerous. 1881, it was a shipwreck in the Patagonia area. And in that time, there were still wild Indians. That's what they call it back then. There was no settlers. And they were afraid to encounter these wild Indians. Oh no, I'm afraid. And it was very late on the day, so let's wait to tomorrow, come up the sand dunes and see if we see any civilization. When they did that, they went up the dunes. What did they saw? A Danish flag, the Dannebrog flaring in the middle of the Patagonia. What? Apparently there was another settler, Danish settler, who settled there a few years before. And he heard about the shipwreck, so he came up with a flag and so to attract the sailor and come to talk to him. One of the sailor, the matron, actually got in love with one of the son of this settler, Martensen, last name, and they still live in the area. So that's a funny story, and the way they still celebrate this happening is to meet at this beach that today has the name of El Condor. Every year in December, it was actually just after Christmas Eve that the shipwreck happened, and the family still gathering and celebrating, and I think this kind of 4 or 5 generations, so that's a funny story. Another thing I like to add that like here, Danish settlers also have their news, the newspaper, like the Danish Pioneer. There was not that many as here, there was mainly 3 main newspaper, and one is the Noah, Syd or Noah, South and North, that lasted up to the 1990s. But it was in the 1940s that they really started to apply to how do you say, to show Danish identity. Why? Denmark stopped existing. They were invaded by the Nazis. The Nazis took over the government, took over the language, took over the flag. You wouldn't see a Danish flag almost in Denmark from 1940 to 1945. But in Argentina, they started to promote Danish identity in Spanish by making this magazine called Dinamarca, as you see here. And of course the newspaper promoting what is Danish identity, the songs, the folk dance, the history, the Vikings, Grundtvig, and so on and so on. When the war stopped, they also stopped promoting this magazine. And of course they also had to have a foundation, money, to send help to Denmark. Not just resources, but also money. When the war stopped, they asked, what should we do with all this money now we gather at the end of the war? Well, they found a school, and they made a school next to Buenos Aires, so the Danish kids could have a closer interaction to the big city. But it didn't do well, it lasted for like 10 years. Then they moved it to my home city, Necochea, and established a Danish school that still exists today, and that is the so-called Alta Mira. This is a private Danish school. I mean, it follows the rule of the government of the Argentinian state, but still have the Danish concept of the culture. And that is the school that I went to, and at some point my music teacher said, now we have to learn the Danish theme, the Danish national song. I didn't understand a word of Danish back then. I couldn't speak Danish. Now sit and write. Der et yndigt land. What? I think it's a T. Okay, I think it's a Y. No, let's put it an E then. You can imagine how that melody sound when I couldn't speak the language. And it still exists like that. Every commemoration, they sing both the Danish first and the Argentinian afterwards. And that's how I learned to sing the national melody without understanding anything. It was first when my parents decided to visit, to come to Denmark, and I saw a football match. Come on, Denmark, yes! And they had to start by singing the national melody. Wow, that's how it sounds original. I got really an open mind. So that's what my experience from the Danish school in Argentina. And one of the things they do is they play handball. And today the school is on the National League of Handball. They have a team, a team that is very good playing handball. Handball was a Danish invasion. They were the ones started to play handball in the world in the beginning of the 1900s. By 1920, with all these immigrants coming to Argentina, they took that sport with them, and so they started playing among the Danish community. So each community had their own team playing handball, one against the other. And one of those was the school of Necochea. So how did they organize themselves? Well, the role of the institution, of course, the church played a major role as a tradition. The Danish church is the one gathering the society. Back then, it was the priest in the Middle Age that didn't know how to write and read and promote knowledge. The peasant didn't know much about the war. I think that tradition is still keeping, so it's the main figure. If you want to continue with being within the society, you go to church. And the church is not just for religion, but it's more like cultural, social atmosphere. But more of that, I think Andres can explain a little, because he's the pastor at in Minnesota. So the church, and this is the first church established in Tandil, the place of Juan Ful, in 1875, 1877, I don't know. But it was built before the Catholic local church. So in that way, the Danes were quite advanced compared to the local inhabitants in Tandil, with the school, the church, and today there are many churches. There are to the left the Church of Buenos Aires, to the far right the churches in Tandil, and then up to the left the church in Necochea, which look very alike a Danish church from the countryside and inside as well. And of course there is a Danish cemetery. In Tres Arroyos there is a cemetery apart from the local cemetery. It's only for Danes, a closed cemetery. And the rumors say that it's the only Danish cemetery throughout America. Now you have to think about it. Is that true? Because, I mean, in Elkhorn, that's the local cemetery, but they're all Danish here. I saw that. I mean, Rasmussen and Hansen and so on. So in a way, it's quite a unique Danish cemetery. But that's a public cemetery. Is there any Danish private cemetery in the US? Okay, think about it and then we can discuss it. Or still, we can still keep the title of having the only Danish cemetery, private cemetery in Argentina of all the Americas. So that's part of it. And of course the schools, and the role of the school is because, as I mentioned, at the beginning the state didn't took much of the institution for the public. So the Danes have to organize to teach Danish and Spanish at the school. So they created like the fall school in Cascachare. That's the one you see here that lasted for 100 years. Now it was lent to the Argentinian state for 100 years more. I think we have 94 years left that it goes back to the Danish community. And that's in Cascachare where Andres went as well. But also there were teachers that went around from farm to farm. And one of those is this guy, Charles Hall. I know this history because in the National Museum of Copenhagen, he also liked archaeological artifacts, objects, to send to the National Museum. So there's a lot of archaeological things in the National Museum that was gathered by this guy, and I could follow his journey throughout the whole of Pampas. He went from farm, to the Christiansen farm, to the Hansen farm, to the Lansen farm, teaching Danish and Danish culture to their kids. And that's how Danishness was kept among the community in one part of it, by the church and by the teachers going from farm to farm. And within this institution, mainly the school, they promoted sports. Handball was the main sport, but at the beginning was football, soccer in here, and folk dance there, and also gymnastic, jump and run, and 100 meters run, what we call the atletism. But that stopped by the end of the 1990s. And so there's no more tournaments between the Danish community of sports. We may, it's funny, so we may do it again. Have to have different teams. And this is the institution that started as a school, but now it's the Danish Club of Dannevirke that still exists, and we hold 100 years of birthday next November 2024. Dannevirke is one of the last Danish clubs that's still surviving. Many of the Danish clubs, because it is in the middle of the Pampas, in the rural area. It's difficult to get there. People decide more to be in the city, go to the discotheque instead of going dancing folky dance in the rural area. You may relate to that as well, I guess. So that's what's happened with this institution. But still, of course, we keep some of the Argentinian tradition, like barbecuing, as you see here, the so-called asado, where we barbecue on the open fire. Now I'm getting hungry, I guess. And this is some of the picture of the teams of handball and football, and in Buenos Aires there still exists a rowing, Scandinavian rowing club, which you see a bit of here. And of course the farmers, as I mentioned, that they started working together, helping together. So you see some of the picture how it used to be 100 years ago, when the machinery was mainly non-existent. And you see, instead of having silos, they have like big bags of like, how much is 70 kilos? Like 20 pounds, something like that. You have to carry on the bags. And then that's how they exported the grain to Europe, by these piles of bags of grains. They turn it more modernized by steam. They have a lot of steam machines then, but back then there were so many people involved in the farming. When harvesting came, November, December, they needed like 50, 70 people. The one who brought the horses, the one who took the machinery, and the one who, there was so much labor. And today, there's only 1-2 guys working in the farms. So that changed a lot as well. And that also made it that it's not the same gathering for Danish descendants. One funny thing now, apart from the farming, is that we do celebrate Christmas Danish way, but in Denmark it's frozen. It's 10 degrees below zero, very cold. You like to go inside, you eat a lot of fat food. In Argentina it's 40 degrees above. It's totally, as the heat is warm, and you eating all that food in the middle of the summer. It's exhausting. But then you have to work throughout the day. Harvesting is harvest season. It's quite a struggle to celebrate Christmas in Argentina. And a little bit of how the farmers, they also celebrate their tradition, like asado fest, playing the guitar as the gaucho did. But the Danish in the farmer in the countryside, they were quite clever to create gardens. They were very famous, they still are very famous, to have a small gardens creating berries and flowers and so on, which the local community, like the Argentinian or Spaniards, Italian, they did not. If you went to an Italianized farm, they didn't have flowers, they didn't have berries. So Danes are very popular still today to have berries and make desserts, like citron fromage and apple cake and so on. So that is very famous within the Danish community abroad. So if you say, I'm Danish, oh, can you make an apple cake, please? So that's how it started. And it started by making these gardens around their farmhouse. And of course, someone very good, building very big houses at their farms. Someone very bad and never did build a house. So this is La Jutlandia near Tres Arroyo, one of the Ambrosius family, very rich family, not today. And they built a house similar to the big, how do you call it, the ghosts, big houses in Denmark. But even my grandfather, he built lower to the right, a house similar to Denmark. And even in the jungle area, up to the right, you see a house built in the middle of the jungle with all the insects, snakes, and humidity. But they try to keep Danish architecture in their homes. And of course the juleplate and the calendars. So when you go to in Argentina, a Danish home, you will still be seeing all this adornment that here at the museum are at the magazine. So, but it's still alive in that way in Argentina. And they were not just farmers, they also get very popular to other labors, like for instance dairy. This, to the right we see in Tres Arroyos a dairy called La Dinamarca, or La Dinamarquesa, La Dinamarca. A restaurant called Restaurant Dania, a Danish restaurant. This is 1920s, 1930s. To the lower left, that's a winery, very early in the 1890s. the Danes settled a winery. They're not very good at making wine, I can tell you that. A couple of years later, they're much better at brewing beer than wine. So let the Italian and Spanish keep their winery. So yeah, no more Danish winery. There's one here in Elvos, and it's doing much better. And of course, sport as well. They play polo. They were blacksmith. They were a musician. So they got involved in many skills for the Argentinian society, and some of them did very well, got very famous. Even in soccer, there's one called I think it's Rune Olsen in the 1950s that was very famous as Maradona and Messi today, but in the 1950s. He went to Real Madrid and played in Europe and so on, and he was a Danish descendant soccer player for Argentina. So there's many individual funny stories about the Danish settlers in Argentina. And today those traditions still being kept. And one of those is the so-called shooting a bird, or full skydning, that have existed for 120 years in Argentina. It's about, in ancient time, peasants, the farmers, have to practice shooting. So they had elaborated a bird made of wood to shoot after. And then if the enemy, Swedish mainly, they will attack them and they will prepare. So that tradition went to the public as a club, shooting club, that went into this tradition of shooting a bird. And the last piece of wood that falls down, you will become a full conqueror, the king of the shoot bird, or bird shooting. And of course, you've been racing like you see in the picture here, hooray, 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 and then play the trumpet, and now we have the new king of the bird shooting. Weird tradition, in a way. It's not that famous in Denmark. It's still famous in this Danish area of Argentina. So my grandfather was a king as well, not my father. And that here was the summer fest, the summer party where they made this bird shooting last summer. And of course, Danish are also popular making sandwich. Funny because Argentina is made of immigrants, and they do have a immigrant party. You wouldn't do that in Denmark, in Vandrefest. Oh, this is immigrant. But in Argentina, it's like, well, they are part of the society today. And funny enough, even though they are more Argentinian, like drinking tea and dressing like a gaucho with a poncho, they still kept a lot of their own tradition, if it is from France, from Italy, from the Basque country. There's a lot of Basque people, from Poland, from Armenia, Slovenia, Estonia, and of course the Danes. They still keeping their own traditions. So in this gathering of all the immigrants feast, they have a tent where they sell food and they make music for each country. And for me, it's a way to get to see the whole world in one place, Argentina. Because I went from 10 to 10, say, oh, you are from Lebanon, yeah, okay, and this is Lebanese food, okay, and how is the Lebanese melody or music and dance? Ah, okay, then I know that, and probably a little bit of the language as well. The same with Germans, the same with Swedish, Estonian, Armenian, and Danish. So, and Danish are very popular for their sandwich and their cakes at this celebration. As you see here. And of course we have the Little Mermaid. It's not called the Little Mermaid, it's called the Little Girl of the Sea, because it's patented, so you have to pay a lot of money to the author, the original author. Oh, we don't have that much money. Okay, we make one made of concrete and call it the Lady of the Sea, something like that. La Niña del Mar. So, and a funny part to end it a little bit of my presentation of the Danishness in Argentina, I'd like to compare a little bit to Iowa. I read an article of Maria Piao that he studied the subject, the Danishness in Iowa in the 1990s, and this article mentioned that in Iowa there were a lot of Danish community, but spread around the state. You have Clinton, Fredville, Ringsted, and of course Elkhorn, Kimmelton, but the majority concentration were about 10,000 Danes at this area. Well, in Argentina, to the right, you see most of the Danes, they settled next to one another, not that far apart. And they were like 15,000 Danish settled in the same area. So in a way, there were more Danish in the same area than there were in Elkhorn and Kimmelton, 15 versus 10,000. But when you take the whole state, there were more Danish here in the US than in Argentina. So that's a different development how the Danishness went to both from in the US and in Argentina. And of course, the Queen went to the area of Tandil in 2019 and had a celebration and a gathering with all the communities, and that's why, whoa, Denmark back to business now, because the Queen visited Argentina 2019, and here you see the very monument of Juan Full, the first official Danish settler in Argentina. I have to mention that the Queen, this was the second visit in Tandil, because the first visit was 1966. She was 16 years old, she was not a queen, a princess. But now was the second time. So that gave more fire to Danishness in Argentina. And that ended up that in 2019, the Danish Argentinian community have turned into an ethnic minority. I'm not sure what it means, but an ethnic minority means that you have a smaller group that keeps their culture, keep their language, that there have to be some benefits. So the ethnic minority of the Danish Argentinian have the benefit that it's much easier to travel to Denmark today than it used to be before. It's much easier to ask for Danish citizenship, much better than if you are Italian or Syrian or Turkish immigrant. I think that's the difference being an ethnic minority of Denmark in Argentina. And as a last label, I will just show you the many activities that there are today in the area of Argentina. What do we have? We have a gathering of ladies. It's called like Hus Mujeres, a little bit of what you did at the sisterhood community. So they are all women gathering together. We also have a not Danish movies, but a cinema that you can talk about the movie you're showing by organized by the Danish church in Necochea. Of course, we have the Misa, Mass. Now this last weekend was the golden confirmation, the one that got confirmation. How do you say confirmation in English? For 50 years ago, they had this celebration again at the Danish church. We have sandwiches, and we have this kind of meeting and talk Danish, samtalerum, you see on the right side. And of course, Dannevirke is also celebrating this weekend, this Sunday, 99 years of existence. So they have a big asado fest, barbecue, Argentinian barbecue. So with that, I think I will end this presentation. I hope you get a little bit to know what the story goes behind the Danish settlement in Argentina. And of course, if you have any question, just come, because I'm very interested to find other similarities and differences between the Danish community in the United States. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Is there much mixing between the different nationalities? It sounded like everybody kind of stays in their own little group, but has there been a lot of intermarriage or anything like that?
Oh, intermarriage. We have this discussion we address. 50 years ago, it was not well seen if you got married with an Argentinian. Ooh, you have to stay together to keep your culture. Today it's like, okay, what is Danish culture? I forgot to speak Danish, I forgot to say skål. Well, skål is they stay skål. So now it's a different perspective, but 50 years ago it was much more close community to the local community. But still, as I mentioned, it exists. You have Italian settles, you have French, there is a French club, there is a Basque club, a big Basque club in Necochea as well, and Basque country and Danish, they like each other. They're both stubborn, like this, and they can get along much easier than the rest of the society. I think one of the unifying things that I noticed that gathered all Argentinians together is Messi, soccer. Now Argentina won the World Cup. You can see that everybody goes together, no matter if they were related, if they were poor or rich, or Italian or original indigenous, and they were all Argentinian. But now the World Cup is over, so they went back to I'm Danish. No, I'm Italian. So I hope that answered a little bit the question. Does anybody still speak Danish? Or how long? Yeah, vi har talt sammen lidt. We need practice a little bit more. We do it with the last melody. So. But that's a funny thing as well, the language. There is a Danish project that went to the United States and Argentina and actually also Canada to figure out how much Danish language have been preserved in each country. And apparently in Argentina is the country that they preserve most of the language, which they don't speak any longer in Denmark. And one of the things, I didn't practice that, but one of the things that I learned that in Argentina, when they say goodbye, they say, "Tisiden, hey, Tisiden." And Tisiden, today you will say, "Go to a side. What happened? Don't you like me?" But in ancient time, Tisiden means, "Till we see you again." Till we see again. So that's an ancient way of saying bye-bye, that it doesn't exist any longer in Denmark, and some people still practicing in Argentina. I don't know if you ever heard that here by the Danes. Do you see that? I think that I would end that to say, see you later. But we finish singing the second melody. Did I give it to you? Yes. I will sing the beginning, and then this is a melody I learned actually in the military. I did the military duty in Denmark as a sailor. So this is kind of a military. I never went out sailing because I played the trumpet in the marine band, and I learned how to drink beer more than playing trumpet. But that's another thing. This melody is also about Danish nationalism, how great a country we have. You can read the translation on the next slide. And it's by the time of 1870s. So I believe that's also one of the melodies that probably Danish settlers took with them, both to the US and Argentina. The melody goes a little bit like this. Du danske mand al din magt, syng ud om vor gamle mor. En grænse hav og fjord blev lagt om huset, hvor hun bor. Mod grønne side strande går stærke stride vande, og over kornets guldglans står vikingestenen vagt. Står vikingestenen vagt. Are we ready? Let's go a bit slower. Let's go. Du danske mand af al din magt, syng ud om vor gamle mor. En krans af hav og fjord blev lagt om huset, hvor hun bor. Mod grønne side strande går stærke stride vande, og over kornets guldglans står vikingestenen vagt. Står vikingestenen